Brett Griffin will not be back on Door Bumper Clear in 2025. NASCAR ratings were up for the season, even just a little bit. We'll talk about that. And are we going to see possible track changes at Circuit of the Americas when NASCAR gets there next season? Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. So if you pay any sort of attention to social media on Wednesday afternoon, and you're probably going to see it going into Thursday as well, NASCAR from their official Twitter account, X account, whatever you want to refer to it as, posted a photo of Joey Logano on a private jet, and he is holding up Monopoly cards. Now, if you've been paying any sort of attention, you know that 2311 Racing, Front Row Motorsports are suing NASCAR for essentially being a monopoly. And Denny Hamlin, of course, saw this and immediately had to fire off his comment because Instagram fingers, in his case, were firing and they were ready to go. And he said, Monopoly cards, perfect, with the okay emoji there. Yeah, I'm not going to get caught up in the little petty back and forth of this. It could just very much be a coincidence that Joey Logano was just playing Monopoly on the plane. Is it NASCAR sending a message? I really don't think so. I think some people are thinking a little bit deeper into this than what is actually there, and I'm kind of just looking at it at the surface level. But nonetheless, we're in the off season, so we're going to have to talk about something, and now we're talking about Monopoly cards. But let's get into what we actually want to talk about today. Door Bumper Clear co-host Brett Griffin announced on Tuesday evening that episode 355 would be his last on the podcast. Brett has been with Door Bumper Clear since it started in 2016 when it was just he and TJ Majors before Freddie Kraft joined in 2020 and kind of made it a trio there with obviously having a host to sort of steer the ship and kind of keep those guys on track. He will be leaving the podcast. And I think this might be news to a lot of people because, well, majority of the fan base is seemingly blocked by Brett. I mean, I even had to go to a burner account to just find it and see that he actually was leaving the podcast. So I think there's going to be a lot of people that are upset about this and a lot of people that are very much going to celebrate him being off. And I think I kind of fall somewhere in the middle. Yeah, Brett has some absolutely horrid takes at times. He says some pretty blasphemous things, a lot of things that I don't necessarily agree with. But when he talks about the business side of the sport, specifically around sponsorship and activations, he very much knows what he's talking about. And I think he's actually had some pretty decent points over the last few weeks of this season. But all of his good points massively get outweighed by all of his really, really bad takes and some of the really dumb things that he says. If you think back to September earlier this year, the week leading up to Watkins Glen, when the whole Haitians eating dogs in Springfield, Ohio, immigrant debate was happening, Brett decided to hop on to that, which he absolutely shouldn't. But listen, free country, you can say and do whatever you want. Just know that there's sometimes consequences to what you're saying. And he said that, and there was a lot of uproar over what he said, and people weren't happy about it. For Brett, though, he delves into the politics thing. And when you work for a company like Dirty Mo Media, who is a growing media company, that's probably something they really want to distance themselves from. So when Brett tweeted this out in the week leading up to Watkins Glen, I made a mental note of it being like, that is pretty outlandish and something I don't think that they would want you to say. Brett's first tweet was, "We've had a Democratic president for 12 of the last 16 years. It's unreal how bad Trump messed up this country during that span." Laughing face emoji. He then quote tweeted that and said, "I don't want my taxes raised again. And if you try and come get my pets, you'll be treated as if you're trying to get one of my kids. It won't end well." Kissing face emoji, to which he replied to that, "Haitians who eat pets' lives don't matter." The whole Haitians eating pets thing was a complete farce. It was made up. It's not real, but it was an agenda that was pushed, and guys like Brett and people in that space very much believed it, and none of it was true. None of it was true. There's no evidence that says it was true, but stuff like that happened. And I remember seeing that and being like, that seems iffy, and there was a lot of uproar over that. I also remember that the podcast that came out the day after Watkins Glen, the Monday following Watkins Glen, Brett talked about how Mike Davis had called him during the end of that race, and they were watching the finish between SVG and Chris Buescher at the same time. And I thought that was a weird thing to bring up and kind of made a mental note of that. So did Brett get forced off of Door Bumper Clear? I don't know, but he did tweet out something that makes me think that he potentially did. When responding to apparently somebody that responded to his post about episode 355 being his last, I can't go see it because I'm blocked. I did see his response, Brett's response, saying, "Thanks for the kind words, means a lot. Not everyone sees it the way you and I do." So that makes me think that maybe Brett Griffin was just not being brought back for 2025. And you can make an argument that that's good and or bad. Freddie Kraft tweeted out that if door bumper clear continues, and then some other things about it, and the if they're kind of being big. I do think that door bumper clear deserves a spot in the sports media landscape, especially in the NASCAR media landscape. I think it brings more positive than it does negative. I think that it does deserve a space in the landscape. I would maybe like to see a bit of an overhaul. If they have Joel Edmonds come on, that's fine, but somebody mute his mic every time he's not talking. Because I don't need Darth Vader breathing into my ears when I'm trying to listen to the podcast, because that was absolutely ridiculous. I think Casey Boat probably should move on from being a host of the podcast because she's not very good in my opinion. But again, that's just my opinion. If other people like her, then by all means keep her. But I think Brett's time at Door Bumper Clear had kind of spaced out and had timed out, and it's time for him to move on to whatever that venture is. Obviously, he has his spot on activations company. I'm sure that's going to take up majority of his time, but I am going to be interested to see if Door Bumper Clear does return in 2025 and what type of format and panel that they will have next season. The 2024 NASCAR Cup Series TV ratings were up over the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series ratings on a per race average basis by 1%. In 2024, the NASCAR Cup Series averaged 2.89 million viewers per week, while in 2023 it was 2.85 million viewers per week. So a small, tiny increase, but you have to remember that the two biggest races on the 2024 calendar were met with rain delays. The 2024 Daytona 500 was delayed from Sunday to Monday, and the Chicago Street Race was delayed later into the day because of the rain that happened there. And then, of course, it was a rain-shortened event as well. So the two biggest races in terms of TV ratings and viewership were both impacted by weather, which probably would have driven that number up, that increased number up, maybe to 2 or 3%. Even if those had been run at the right time, especially Daytona 500, because it is the behemoth of the schedule. But the NASCAR Cup Series Championship finale at Phoenix this past weekend finished down 1% actually compared to the 2023 version. The race did peak at 3.5 million viewers, which is pretty solid, had an average viewership of 2.9 million. The Xfinity Series, though, did see a really good bump up in viewership over its 2023 counterpart, which was on USA. Remember, this year's race was on the CW, which of course is free to air. Obviously, anybody can get it if you have a digital antenna. This year's race attracted 1.113 million viewers, up 17% over the USA counterpart from 2023. The Truck Series Championship finale also saw a 14% increase in viewership over last year's race as well. Finally, they decided to run it at 8 p.m. on a Friday night and not 10 p.m., which was a really dumb decision to do, but I get it. College football definitely would probably get higher ratings than that. But for NASCAR, this is a net positive. Yeah, you'd like to see a bigger increase, but the fact that they didn't lose and they've been gaining just incrementally is still a solid improvement over years past as they continue to try to build back up to those even pre-COVID levels in 2020, back to sort of what they had in 2019. Yeah, I think all sports have kind of suffered outside of football for the most part. But even that, you've seen some ratings not match sort of what they've done in years past outside of like your gigantic marquee matchups and things like that. So for NASCAR, I think it's a good positive to see the ratings continue to go up, even just by a little bit. It's still better than nothing. And now we head into 2025 with a pretty exciting schedule for all three series, honestly. NASCAR is going to Mexico. That should get a pretty good television rating in itself. Back to the streets of Chicago, the Daytona 500. And then you have the in-season tournament. Obviously, different TV partners. It's going to be difficult to measure it when it's on Amazon Prime. I assume they'll release some numbers, maybe like they do for Thursday Night Football. But overall, it's a good thing to see popularity of the sport continuing to grow, even at just a little bit. All right, and let's talk about a rumor that's going around. There's a lot of rumors, but we'll start off with this one because it seems to be kind of the easiest one to talk about at the moment. But NASCAR Rumors Nostalgia on Instagram, they typically have pretty good information, and they have said that the idea has been floated for the NASCAR Cup Series and all NASCAR series that are going to COTA to use the Supercars layout that they used in 2013 for their lone trip over to the United States, the Australian Supercar Series, that is. If you're not familiar with the layout, essentially going through the S's, when you get to turn 5, they would hang a left and cut across the infield there and then rejoin on the backstretch, about 3/4 of the way down the backstretch at COTA, and then go into turn 12 right there. Supercars was able to do that layout in 1 minute and 33 seconds. Currently, the Cup Series takes about 2 minutes and 12 seconds and longer over the course of a run to go around the full layout of the circuit. One, it would increase the number of laps that fans would see. Two, it would really decrease the lap time for cautions because, boy, is it a long caution lap there. It's like Road America. You're like, all right, well, set off here, go to the bathroom, get food, come back, still be on the same pace lap. It is a long lap at COTA. I do like that the NASCAR Cup Series goes to Circuit of the Americas. I think that they absolutely should be there. I think it is good that they're there and not at Texas Motor Speedway. I don't think Texas Motor Speedway deserves 2 dates. I think that one of those dates should absolutely be at COTA. It is the premier road course facility in this country. Yeah, they're never going to fill it like Formula One does because it's supply and demand. There's 3 Formula One races in this country every single year. There are 37 NASCAR Cup Series races in the United States in 2025. Supply and demand. I don't necessarily think I need to tell everybody else about that. If you can't figure it out, just go to YouTube and like Google supply and demand, and maybe that'll teach you out there if you didn't pay attention in high school. But for the most part, I think it would be a good thing for the Cup Series. The only thing I don't like about it is it takes away a pretty good passing zone, which is that long run down the backstretch. Well, realistically, potentially even 2 passing zones, because when you get to the top of the hill to head down to turn 11, which is kind of that hairpin, that's a pretty good passing zone right there. Marco Andretti probably doesn't love it, considering the rear end of his race truck just fell out there earlier this year. One of the more bizarre things. I think Kyle Busch also got pinballed out of the way in the Truck Series at one point too, so he probably doesn't love it. Going down into turn 12, though, that long backstretch into that heavy braking zone, another good passing opportunity. So I'm iffy on the changes. Yeah, I absolutely understand wanting more laps, wanting a shorter caution period, and a shorter lap time. I get that 100%. But at the same time, I feel like you're probably taking out 2 good passing zones, but you will eliminate one of the most controversial sections of that racetrack, though, where we talk about having 4 tires off. So we'll have to see. There, of course, we'll still have the beginning part of the S's, which will have a track limit debate there 100% when we get back there for the 3rd race in 2025. But I kind of like the idea. If they don't do it, I'm fine with it. If they do it, I'm fine with it as well. I'm interested to see what people think. So let me know in the comments what you think about Brett Griffin leaving door bumper clear. NASCAR ratings being up again, possibly using the Supercars layout, the short course at Circuit of the Americas. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHardBlog.